The ship was older than the empire that claimed it. Her hull bore the scars of centuries, each groove and dent a story of struggle against the unending reach of the void. She had been named Ambition by the first human settlers who crossed the dark between the spiral arms. It was said they built her in the shadow of a red dwarf, powered by dreams and steel, when humanity had no colonies, no fleets, and no allies. Now, Ambition drifted in the outer reaches of the Perseid expanse, alone, defiant, and not quite dead. Commander Ren Vale stood at the observation deck, a tall figure in a dark uniform that still smelled faintly of machine oil. His reflection shimmered across the glass like a ghost haunting its own future. Stars stretched out before him, cold and scattered, indifferent witnesses to the exhaustion in his eyes. Behind him, the quiet hum of the ship's reactors pulsed like a heartbeat. A soft voice cut through the silence. "You should rest, Commander," said a young woman entering the deck. Her name was Mara Eden, Chief of Communications, and one of the few aboard who still smiled when the lights flickered. "You've been up since the jump." Vale turned, his gaze distant. "Rest, and leave the ship unsupervised while she's leaking power from 100 seams? No, I'll rest when we make contact with someone who isn't trying to kill us." Mara sighed and leaned against the console, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "You're assuming there's anyone left out here." Vale gave her a hard look. "There's always someone left. The frontier doesn't forgive, but it forgets slowly. Someone remembers us." The words hung between them. The last transmission from Earth had arrived over 30 years ago, long before either of them were born. The Ambition's crew numbered 40 souls, descended from the original colonists who had fled after the Union Wars. They had spent their entire lives aboard this ship, generations sustaining a dream that no one remembered clearly anymore. And yet they endured, because humans always did. The console flickered. Static whispered across the deck, followed by a faint, rhythmic pulse, 3 short tones, too long, then silence. Mara's eyes widened. "Signal, not background radiation, this is structured." Vale moved quickly to her side. "Direction, vector, 22 degrees spinward relative to the local cluster. Range uncertain, could be anywhere from a few light hours to a few light days." "Could be a distress beacon, or a trap," Mara added. Vale's mouth tightened. "Everything worth finding starts as one or the other." He pressed the intercom switch. "Bridge crew, report to stations. Plot intercept course to the signal origin. Minimal thrust to conserve fuel. Let's see what the frontier has left to show us." Hours later, the Ambition crept through the dark, her engines a low growl that reverberated through every deck. The ship's hull plating was patched with alloys of differing hues, a mosaic of desperate repairs and scavenged parts. In the habitation ring, hydroponic vines swayed gently with the ship's slow spin, and children laughed in the gravity field that fluctuated just enough to make their steps bounce. Life aboard Ambition was not easy, but it was real. Humanity had endured far worse. On the bridge, Ren Vale studied the incoming signal. It had changed, evolving into a steady repeating pattern that almost sounded like speech. Not human speech, but something close. Mara translated what she could. "The syntax is recursive. It's not a distress call, it's identification." "Who are they identifying to?" "To us, maybe. The signal modulates in frequency when we adjust our receiver gain. It's responding." Vale's jaw tightened. "Then someone's listening." He stared at the screen, at the faint coordinates marking their approach vector. A cold feeling settled in his gut. Humanity's first encounters with non-human intelligences had been brief and bloody. The memory of the HFY War, if you could call it that, still haunted what was left of their culture. The Ambition was not a warship. She carried no rail cannons, no torpedo bays. Her only defense was her will to survive. The signal pulsed again, louder now. The message was clearer, a set of coordinates and a simple phrase repeated in tonal bursts. Mara frowned as she ran it through the translation matrix. "It says, 'Seek the light that endures.'" Over and over, Vale looked at her. "That's a human phrase." "I know, but it's not human encoding." The modulation structure, no human algorithm matches it. So whoever sent this knows our language, but not our systems. Exactly. Vale exhaled slowly. Prepare a probe. I want visual confirmation before we close in. Mara hesitated. Commander, if it's hostile, then we'll know what kind of death waits for us before we meet it face to face. The probe launched into the void like a flicker of light swallowed by a sea of black. Minutes turned into hours. The crew gathered in hushed anticipation, watching the data feed stream back across the bridge. The first image appeared, grainy, distorted, but even through the static, something unmistakable emerged. A structure. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, floating amidst debris and glowing faintly with internal power. Not a station in any human design, though its geometry was alien, fluid and shifting, as if the builders had woven metal rather than forged it. At its heart burned a steady blue core. Mara whispered, "It's alive." Vale watched in silence. The signal was coming from the structure's surface. As the probe approached, the energy readings spiked. Then, abruptly, everything went dark. "Telemetry lost," Mara said. "Signal interference spiked at the last instant. Whatever it is, it's active." Vale straightened. "Bring us within 1,000 kilometers. Prepare a boarding team." Mara blinked. "You're serious? We don't even know if it's safe to." He turned toward her, eyes hard. "We're dying out here, Eden. Power's running low, food's running thin, and our last reactor cycle is less than 2 years from failure. If there's anything on that structure we can use, fuel, technology, even a trace of civilization, we take the risk. That's what humanity does. We reach." Mara nodded slowly. "Then we reach." The shuttle, vigilant, detached from Ambition's dorsal hangar with a low hiss. It carried 6 crew members: Ren Vale, Mara Eden, pilot Harvan Tolk, engineer Ilya Wren, medic Kira Solon, and security chief Rorik Den. As they approached the structure, Vale felt the weight of the unknown pressing against him. The closer they came, the clearer the details grew, veins of metal pulsing with blue light, intricate patterns like veins across a living organism. "This doesn't look built," Harvan murmured. "It looks grown. Keep your mind on the controls," Vale said quietly. The shuttle passed through a field of faint energy ripples. Every sensor flickered. For a moment, the stars vanished. Then they were inside. A vast chamber opened before them, impossibly large, easily several kilometers across. Floating platforms drifted in slow orbits, illuminated by threads of light weaving between them. Rorik whistled under his breath. "If this is a tomb, it's a god's tomb." Vale unstrapped and floated toward the viewport. "Set us down near the strongest energy reading." They landed on a smooth surface that rippled faintly under their weight. The moment they stepped out, their boots left glowing impressions that faded slowly, as if the structure itself were aware of them. Ilya raised his scanner. "Atmosphere's breathable. Composition matches standard oxygen-nitrogen balance, but trace isotopes are unfamiliar." "Something made this environment for us," Kira said softly, "or for something like us." Vale's hand hovered near his sidearm. "Stay close. We find the signal source, take what we can, and get out." They moved through arching corridors that pulsed faintly with their footsteps. The walls seemed to respond, shifting in texture, forming paths that guided them deeper. Mara's receiver pinged. "Signal's strongest ahead, just beyond this next chamber." They stepped through an archway and stopped. At the center of the room floated a sphere of blue light, suspended within a lattice of metallic threads. Within the sphere, faint shapes moved, too human to be coincidence. The sphere pulsed once, and a voice echoed through the chamber. It spoke in words they understood. "You have come far. You have endured, the light remembers you." The crew froze. Vale's voice was steady. "Identify yourself. I am the record, the memory of the first flame that crossed the void, the remnants of those who came before." Mara's throat tightened. "You mean humans?" The light pulsed again. "Once, yes, but time changes what flesh cannot preserve. We were the ones who left before the wars. We sought to escape the decay of your empires. We found a way to become more." Vale stepped closer, awe and fear mingling. "You're saying this construct is human? Humanity's shadow, perhaps, A continuation. We carried your spark across the abyss and learned to live within the fabric of the stars themselves. You, however, you remained, you endured through chaos. You are proof that the will of your kind did not die. The blue light flared brighter. The frontier is ending. A greater silence approaches. You must decide what humanity will be when the last light fades. Before Vale could respond, the floor trembled, the walls dimmed, and a low hum filled the air. Ilya shouted, "Energy surge, something's activating." "Retreat to the shuttle," Vale barked. As they ran, the corridors began to collapse inward, folding like living metal. The chamber twisted, guiding them back to the landing bay as if the station itself wanted them gone. They reached the shuttle and launched, the blue sphere's glow visible behind them. As they cleared the structure, it pulsed once more, then disintegrated into fragments of light, scattering across the void. Mara stared through the viewport. "What just happened?" Vale's voice was quiet. "We were given a message." Harvin turned in his seat. "And what message is that?" Vale looked out at the stars. "That we're not the first to endure, but maybe we'll be the last." The Ambition awaited them in orbit, her battered hull gleaming faintly under the distant starlight. As they docked, the faint echoes of the alien voice lingered in Vale's mind. "Seek the light that endures." He did not yet understand what it meant, but he knew the frontier had changed. Humanity had touched something ancient, something born from its own forgotten hands, and in that encounter, the long frontier had awakened once more. The Ambition drifted in silent orbit above the place where the alien construct had dissolved. The debris field shimmered faintly, fragments of blue radiance fading into the endless dark. To the naked eye, it looked as if the void itself were breathing, drawing the light in, swallowing the last remnant of something older than humanity's recorded past. Commander Ren Vale stood on the bridge, the faint hum of the ship's systems filling the air. The crew around him worked in quiet focus, though a tremor of unease rippled through them all. What they had witnessed defied every law of matter and memory. "Radiation levels are dropping back to background," reported Ilya Wren from the engineering console. "No debris with mass greater than a few micrograms." "It's as if the whole thing unraveled at the molecular level. Or dematerialized," Mara Eden added softly. She sat at the communications terminal, eyes fixed on the fading readouts. "I'm still receiving echoes of the signal, though, like a ghost frequency." Vale turned toward her. "Decode it." "I already am, but it's strange. Every time I isolate one pattern, another overlays it." "It's like it's alive." Vale frowned. "Alive?" Mara hesitated, then nodded. "The modulation shifts in reaction to our systems. When I adjust the filter parameters, it adapts. It's not random, it's responding." Rorik Den, the security chief, leaned back in his chair. "So what, the thing's still talking to us, after it blew itself apart?" "Maybe not talking," Mara replied, "but listening." The bridge fell quiet. For a long moment, only the distant whine of the Ambition's old engines filled the air. Vale's mind replayed the words spoken by the blue entity. "You must decide what humanity will be when the last light fades." He had no idea what that meant, but he could feel the weight of it, like a prophecy whispered across centuries. He finally broke the silence. "Bring the signal into isolation. Feed it into the navigation array. If it's trying to show us something, I want to see where it leads." Mara nodded. Her hands danced across the console. The main display flickered to life, showing the map of nearby systems, a sparse region of the Perseid expanse with only a handful of dim stars. As she filtered the signal through the navigation program, faint threads of light began to trace across the holographic display. A pattern emerged. It wasn't random, it was a map. "Coordinates," Mara murmured, "somewhere deep in the void between the stellar fields. There's nothing charted there." Vale studied the display. "Then that's where we go." Rorik scowled. "Commander, with respect, we don't even know if that thing meant to help us. Could be a lure." "Everything out here could be a lure," Vale replied, "and everything worth finding comes with a price. Set course." The engines of the Ambition rumbled to life. The ship angled toward the empty stretch of dark where no human vessel had ever gone. Fuel reserves were low, but Vale ordered half the remaining hydrogen stores diverted to thrust. They would reach the coordinates within 2 weeks. Life aboard the ship settled into routine as they traveled. The outer hull groaned from pressure differentials, the recycled air carried the faint tang of ozone, and the artificial gravity field hummed in its irregular rhythm. Children played in the hydroponic section under lamps that flickered like artificial suns. Elder crew members told stories of Earth, stories passed down so many times that no one could say what was true anymore. They spoke of blue skies and oceans wide as continents, of a place where you could breathe without a mask, walk without counting the hours of oxygen left in your tank. For the youngest aboard Ambition, those were myths, fairy tales from a forgotten age. Ren Vale listened to those stories when he could, though he rarely joined the telling. He was not born on Earth either. He had been born in orbit around Titan, raised in the wreckage of humanity's retreat. To him, the world below the stars was just another dream. But he believed in something else, the unyielding will that had carried humanity this far. If the entity's message was true, then somewhere beyond the void lay the next step in that journey. 10 days into the voyage, Mara found him in the observation dome again. He stood before the panoramic glass, arms folded, watching the streaks of distant starlight drift past. "You don't sleep much," she said, approaching. He didn't look away from the stars. "Sleep feels wasteful lately. You think too much for one man. Someone has to." She smiled faintly. "If you keep trying to carry the whole species on your back, you'll break." Vale finally turned, his expression unreadable. "You think I'm doing this for them? I think you do know why you're doing it anymore," she said quietly. "Maybe it's not about saving humanity. Maybe it's about proving we still deserve to exist." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Maybe." Mara hesitated, then reached into her pocket and handed him a small metallic disc. "Found this in the archive bay, an old memory crystal. The label says it's from the original settlers who built this ship. The data's corrupted, but there's a recording that still works." He took it carefully. "What kind of recording?" She shrugged. "You'll have to play it to find out." Vale slipped the crystal into his coat. "Thank you." She started to turn away, then paused. "Ren, whatever's waiting for us out there, don't face it alone. You've got people who believe in you." He nodded once. "I know." When she left, he stood alone again, the weight of her words lingering heavier than gravity. That night he played the recording. The projection flickered to life. A woman's voice, old and weathered, filled the dim cabin. "My name is Commander Talia Venn, captain of the colony vessel Ambition. If you're hearing this, it means the ship has survived longer than we dared to dream." Vale's chest tightened. This was the founder herself, the one whose name was etched into the ship's central memorial. The recording continued. "We built this ship not as an escape, but as a promise. Humanity was fracturing. The wars consumed everything we built. But we believed that somewhere beyond the known stars, we could begin again, not as conquerors, but as caretakers of what we once were. If those who follow hear my voice, remember this. The measure of humanity is not how far we travel, but how we endure when there is nowhere left to go." The image faded. Vale sat in silence long after it ended. When he finally rose, he felt the faintest ember of something he hadn't felt in years, hope, cautious and small, but real. On the 13th day, the Ambition reached the coordinates, but there was no planet, no station, not even an asteroid, just darkness. The crew stared at the empty void on the main display, confusion rippling through them. "This can't be right," said Ilya, frowning at his instruments. No gravitational anomalies, no energy signatures, just vacuum. Vale's voice was calm. Mara checked the signal again. She adjusted the receiver. The ghost frequency pulsed faintly, steady and rhythmic. "It's still here," she said. "Stronger now." Vale leaned forward. "Project Source Vector." A faint sphere appeared in the holographic display, a region of distorted space, less than a kilometer across. "Spatial distortion," Ilya muttered, "but there's no mass reading." Mara's eyes widened. "Commander, it's a field aperture, like a wormhole, but stable." Rorik swore softly. "A hole in space, and you're thinking of flying through it." Vale's jaw tightened. No. I'm thinking of surviving through it. If this is what the message led us to, then we go. The ambition drifted closer to the distortion. Its surface shimmered like a film of liquid light, reflecting the ship's hull in 1,000 warped fragments. Sensors flared with static. Artificial gravity flickered. Every circuit seemed to hum in resonance with the aperture. Then, as they crossed the threshold, the stars vanished. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, no light, no sound, no sensation of motion. Then reality returned. The ship emerged into a vast region of space, unlike any they had ever seen. A nebula spread across the void like a living tapestry, swirling with crimson and gold. Towers of crystalline matter rose from drifting asteroids, linked by webs of luminous energy. Mara whispered, "It's beautiful." Vale was silent. In the distance, a massive structure hung suspended in the nebula's heart, greater even than the first they had found. It was not dead. It pulsed with life and power, its surface shifting in slow, graceful motion. Ilya checked his readings. "I don't believe this. The energy output exceeds stellar fusion. The whole thing's a power source." "Signal origin?" Vale asked. "Center of the structure, it's calling us in." "Then answer the call." The ambition approached cautiously. As they neared, a corridor of light opened in the structure's surface, like a mouth inviting them in. Vale gathered the same away team as before. They boarded the Vigilant and descended once more into the unknown. Inside, the atmosphere shimmered with faint motes of golden dust. The air was warm, carrying a scent faintly like ozone and something floral, alive. The floor beneath their boots resonated faintly, as though responding to their heartbeat. "This place is aware," Kira murmured. "Every biological reading matches human norms, but the structure is adjusting to us, actively." Mara's scanner beeped. "Energy source ahead, strong signal." They followed the corridor until it opened into a vast chamber. At its center stood a figure, not a machine, not quite human. It was tall, composed of interwoven strands of light and metal, with features that shifted and reformed as it moved. Its eyes glowed faintly blue. When it spoke, its voice echoed like a choir. "You have come far, children of Earth." Vale took a slow breath. "You're the same voice we heard before. I am the continuation of that voice. The first fragment was a seed sent to seek those who still remembered the light. You have proven that humanity endures." "What are you?" Mara asked softly. "We were once like you," the being said, "flesh and blood bound by time and death. But we sought to preserve what could not survive the wars. We built the memory of iron, a network of thought and machine meant to hold the essence of our kind. We transcended." Vale frowned. "You abandoned your bodies. We evolved beyond them. But in doing so, we lost what you have kept, the will to struggle. The hunger to reach." The being stepped closer, the air shimmering around it. "Now our existence fades. The energy that sustains us is failing. We called across the void, seeking the ones who would come after us." Mara's voice trembled. "You want us to take your place, not to replace us, to remember us, to carry forward what we could not." Vale met the being's gaze. "And what exactly do you offer in return?" "Knowledge, power, the means to endure when the stars themselves begin to die. We can repair your vessel, expand your reach, teach you the laws that lie beyond the flesh. But you must choose. Choose what? To remain what you are, or to become what we became." The chamber fell into silence. Vale looked around at his crew, the faces of those who had trusted him through every storm, every famine, every uncertain leap into the dark. He felt the enormity of the choice pressing against his chest. "We'll need time to decide," he said. "Time is the one resource you have little of," the being replied. "The nebula that sustains us collapses with every passing cycle. Soon there will be nothing left. Choose quickly, Commander Vale of the vessel Ambition." They returned to the ship in silence. The crew gathered in the central hall, arguments rising like waves. "Transcendence? They want to turn us into machines," Rorik shouted. "That's not survival, that's surrender." "But if what they're saying is true," said Kira, "they can give us energy, food, protection. We could rebuild. Humanity could finally stop running." Vale listened as they argued. He said nothing. Finally, Mara turned to him. "What do you think?" He looked around the room. I think they're right about one thing. We are dying, slowly, quietly, but dying all the same. Every child born on this ship lives with less than the one before. If there's a chance to change that, Rorik slammed his fist on the table. At what cost, Ren? At the cost of being human? Vale's eyes hardened. Maybe being human means more than the shape of our bodies. Silence fell. He rose slowly. I'll meet with them again, alone. When he returned to the nebula's heart, the being awaited him. Vale stood before it, hands clasped behind his back. You said we have a choice. Show me what becoming like you means. The being extended a hand. Step forward. Vale hesitated only a moment before taking its hand. Light surged through him, his vision filled with stars, memories, voices, not his own. He saw the first human vessels leave the solar cradle, the birth of the memory of iron, the moment they shed their mortal shells and became something luminous and infinite. He felt their joy, their loss, their endless silence. Then it was over. He staggered back, gasping. The being watched him. Now you understand. We offer you the chance to preserve humanity forever. No hunger, no death, no pain. Vale met its gaze, and no will to reach. You would still explore, still learn, but without struggle, he said quietly, we lose the meaning of it. The being's expression flickered. Perhaps, but meaning cannot save you when the void takes all. Vale turned away. Then we'll take our chances with the void. Back aboard the Ambition, the engines flared to life. The crew watched as the ship rose away from the glowing nebula. The entity did not try to stop them. As the aperture reopened ahead, Mara stood beside Vale. You refused. Yes. Why? He looked out at the light dissolving behind them. Because they forgot what it means to fight for tomorrow. I won't let us forget. Their ambition passed through the gateway. Behind them, the memory of iron faded, its light dimming until it was one more distant star. Ahead lay the dark, endless frontier. Vale's voice carried through the ship. Set course for the nearest system. Humanity still has ground to claim. The engines roared, and the ship surged forward into the infinite. The stars stretched ahead like a sea of fire and darkness, vast and indifferent. The Ambition had crossed the aperture without pursuit, the entity behind them fading into a single pinprick of light among millions. But silence settled over the ship in its wake, a silence thick with thought, heavy with the weight of what they had turned down. In the observation dome, Commander Ren Vale stood alone. Beyond the glass, a thin ribbon of starlight traced their course through the void. It reminded him of the early migration routes humans had carved out centuries ago, when hope and desperation were indistinguishable things. They had chosen to remain human. But what did that mean now? He remembered the sensation the entity had shown him, unending awareness, freedom from hunger, death, and fear. It had been intoxicating, perfect, and hollow. The door behind him hissed open. Mara Eden stepped in quietly, her hair still damp from the ship's humidity recycling bay. She had been helping repair one of the water distribution manifolds with the maintenance teams, a task that had become more frequent as their systems aged. I thought I'd find you here, she said softly. Vale didn't turn. Is it that obvious? You always come here after something big, she replied. It's like the stars help you think. They don't help me think, Vale said. They remind me how small we are. Mara joined him at the railing. Together they watched the dark horizon of space slip past like a slow tide. They keep asking me if we made the right choice, she said. The crew, I mean, no one's saying it out loud, but I can feel it. Some of them wanted what the entity offered. Vale exhaled through his nose. Of course they did. They're tired, Ren, she said gently. We all are. This ship creaks a little louder every year. The reactors are losing output. The hull plating's thinning. Every jump costs us something we don't have enough of. Vale's hands tightened on the railing. I know, do you? She asked. Because when you gave that order, you didn't let anyone else choose. You decided for everyone. His jaw clenched. Someone had to. Maybe, she said, her voice soft but firm, but this isn't just your burden. He turned to look at her then. The light from the stars painted her features in silver and shadow. She didn't look afraid of him or angry, just certain. I was raised on this ship, Mara said. I've seen what happens when people start losing hope. You can't hold all of it alone, Ren. You'll break. He stared at her a long time, then nodded once. I won't break, but I'll remember what you said. Mara managed a faint smile. Good, because I'm not planning on letting you steer us into oblivion without a fight. For the first time that night, something like a ghost of humor flickered in Vale's eyes. 12 hours later, the ambition dropped out of drift near an uncharted star system. The star was a dim orange dwarf, burning low and steady. Two rocky planets circled close, their surfaces scorched but stable. Farther out, a third world glimmered faintly beneath the star's light. Harvan Tolk, the pilot, whistled as the readings came in. Well, would you look at that? Orbits stable, temperatures cold but not frozen, could be something here worth settling. Ilya Wren's hands moved over the engineering console. The atmosphere's thin but breathable with filtration. Radiation levels are manageable. We could land here. Rorik Den crossed his arms. Or something else already has. Vale leaned forward, studying the telemetry. Long-range scans. No major power signatures, Mara reported. Some magnetic anomalies near the northern hemisphere, but nothing that screams civilization. Good, Vale said. Prep the shuttle. We'll take a team down. The Vigilant descended through the upper layers of the planet's atmosphere, its hull shuddering as it cut through frigid air. Below stretched an expanse of dark tundra, broken by vast black stone formations that jutted from the ground like the bones of something ancient. They landed near one of the formations, a jagged tower of rock that spiraled upward at an unnatural angle. Not exactly a paradise, Harvan muttered, securing the shuttle. Rorik unlatched his rifle from its mount. Better than freezing in orbit. Let's make it quick. The air was thin and sharp. Vale stepped out first, boots crunching against hard, frost-bitten ground. Wind howled softly across the plain. Mara adjusted the receiver strapped to her arm. I'm picking up faint harmonic frequencies, almost like a resonance inside the stone. Ilya crouched near the base of the tower, running a handheld scanner across the surface. This isn't natural rock. It's been shaped, molecular latticeworks too uniform. Someone built this. Rorik tightened his grip on his weapon. Question is, are they still around? Vale ran his hand along the tower. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch, like something asleep but dreaming. No power signatures? None, Ilya said, but whatever made this had energy to spare. They followed a path of smaller structures leading toward a shallow basin. As they crested a rise, the ground opened into a hollow. There, half buried in frost, stood the remnants of a facility, metallic arches, shattered domes, fragments of walls still holding shape after gods knew how many centuries. Mara's breath caught. This isn't alien. Ilya crouched beside a corroded emblem on the nearest arch. The engraved letters were faint but still legible. Human, he whispered. This was built by humans. The emblem bore the mark of a long-dead expeditionary fleet, a stylized flame encircled by 3 rings. Vale's pulse quickened. This predates ambition, maybe even predates the Union Wars. Then that means, Mara said slowly, we're not the first to reach this system. They spent hours exploring the ruins. Inside what had once been a command structure, Vale found a wall of shattered data nodes. Dust floated like ash in the air, undisturbed for centuries. Harvan worked to power up a portable generator. The terminals flickered weakly, casting ghostly light across the crumbling chamber. Mara leaned over one of the cracked screens. Most of the data's gone, but there are fragments here. Logs, mission records. Anything readable? Vale asked. Some, she said. They came from a colony transport called the Dawnspire, left Sol during the expansion epoch. The logs mention resource shortages, long-term settlement plans, and then, she trailed off, her face tightening. Vale stepped closer. Then what? Then a single line, repeated over and over. She turned the cracked display toward him. The text glowed faintly. The sun beneath the ice remembers. Ilya frowned. What does that mean? Vale's gaze drifted toward the north, toward the massive sheets of glacial ice that blanketed the horizon. Something buried, he said softly, something they didn't want forgotten. Night fell quickly on the tundra world. From the edge of their encampment, The stars burned sharp and bright above the black stone towers. Rorik paced the perimeter with quiet, precise steps, his rifle cradled in both hands. He didn't trust the silence here. Inside the temporary shelter, Vale and Mara sat with the cracked terminal's backup drive on the table between them. "It's old," Mara said. "This colony must have been abandoned at least 3 centuries ago. But why? There's no sign of battle, no wreckage, just absence." "Something drove them underground," Vale said, "or something beneath the ground drove them away." Mara's mouth twisted. "You really know how to make a night cozy, Commander." He allowed himself the faintest smirk. "It's a gift." Then her expression softened. "Ren, when we stood in front of that entity, you said no without hesitation. What if the thing buried here gives us the same kind of choice?" He didn't answer right away. Outside, the wind keened through the towers, low and hollow. "Then," he said at last, "we make a better one." The next morning, their sensors picked up the first anomaly, a magnetic pulse, faint and rhythmic, emanating from beneath the northern ice. Ilya stared at the readings. "Whatever it is, it's active." Mara adjusted the receiver, same harmonic pattern as the tower, the whole site is connected. Vale straightened. "Then that's where we go." Rorik exhaled slowly. "Into the glacier, of course we are." The Vigilance engines roared to life. They lifted off the tundra and sped north across the frozen expanse. Ice sheets stretched like glass planes beneath them, fractured in places by deep fissures that seemed bottomless. Half an hour later, they reached the source of the signal, a circular fissure at least a kilometer wide, its edges rimmed with black stone and frost. As they hovered above it, Mara's voice came quietly over the comm. "The sun beneath the ice remembers." Vale stared into the abyss. "Then let's remind it we're here." The shuttle descended. The walls of the fissure gleamed as the Vigilance sank lower into the dark. Frozen layers of ice glimmered under the shuttle's lights like glass over deep water. Beneath the frost lay threads of something metallic, wires, conduits, maybe even roads, buried so deep they shouldn't have existed at all. Mara kept her eyes on the scanner. Depth reading increasing. "We're almost 2 kilometers down. I'm picking up energy flux below the ice, steady frequency, artificial origin." Haven gripped the controls, jaw set. "Steady as she goes. The air pressure's stabilizing. Almost feels like we're descending into an atmosphere pocket." Vale stood behind the pilot's chair, watching the readout glow pale blue across the cockpit. "How far?" "Another few hundred meters." The light from above dimmed to nothing. Only the shuttle's floodlights remained, spearing through the dark. The ice around them shifted from blue to black, rippling faintly as though responding to their descent. Then, without warning, the sensors spiked. "Massive magnetic fluctuation," Ilya shouted. "Field distortion ahead." Before anyone could react, a surge of energy gripped the shuttle. The hull shuddered violently. Haven wrestled the controls, but the Vigilant was caught in a pull no engine could counter. "Brace," Vale barked. The shuttle dropped through the last layer of ice, and then the world inverted. For a heartbeat, there was only blinding white. Then the storm cleared. They were floating in open air, surrounded by a vast subterranean cavern. Above them, the ceiling of ice stretched miles high, glowing faintly with inner light. Below, an entire structure rose from the frozen ground, a city of dark towers and metallic spires, perfectly preserved beneath the ice. Rorik swore softly. "That's no colony outpost, that's a fortress." Mara's voice trembled. "It's human design, but not any era I know. The architecture's different, clean lines, symmetrical, like a blend of human and alien craft." Vale's heartbeat quickened, set us down near the central structure. The Vigilant landed on a broad metallic platform overlooking the buried city. Frost clung to the towers like veins of silver. The air was breathable, faintly metallic in taste, as though recycled by unseen systems. They stepped out into the cavern, their boots crunching against ancient dust. The silence was immense. Vale's voice echoed softly. "Stay alert. Power readings." Ilya checked his scanner. "Still active, Commander. Whatever's keeping this city intact hasn't failed in centuries." They crossed a long bridge toward the largest building, a domed hall surrounded by monolithic statues. Each statue was humanoid, but not quite human, their faces smooth, their hands cupped together as if holding invisible flames. Mara whispered, "The same symbol we saw on the ruins above, the flame within the rings." "Looks ceremonial," Kira said. "Maybe a temple." Vale approached the entrance. The door was seamless, a single sheet of black alloy. When he touched it, faint blue veins of light traced outward from his palm. The door split open soundlessly. Inside, the hall glowed with the faint luminescence of walls alive with energy. At the center stood a column of transparent crystal filled with swirling gold mist. Mara scanned it. It's a containment field, still powered. The energy inside matches the same harmonic frequency we traced from orbit. Vale studied the pillar. "So this is what the Dawnspire settlers found." Ilya ran his scanner along the base. "Commander, you'll want to see this." Embedded within the lower surface of the pillar were dozens of small metallic plaques, each engraved with a name. Mara crouched, brushing frost from one of them. "These are human names, every one of them." Kira's voice was barely a whisper. "It's a memorial." Rorik shook his head. "No memorial glows like that." Before Vale could respond, the golden mist shifted. A faint voice filled the air, fragmented, echoing, but unmistakably human. "To whoever finds this place, we are what remains." The crew froze. "We came to this world seeking refuge from the wars. We thought we could build again, but beneath the ice, we found something older than we were. It spoke to us, promised warmth, safety, endurance. We listened, and it took us." Mara's eyes widened. "It's a recording." The voice continued. "If you hear this, know that the light beneath the ice is alive. It remembers what we were, and it wants to be us again." The mist flared. A shockwave of golden energy rippled through the room. "Back!" Vale shouted. But the energy wasn't hostile, it was communicative. It brushed across them like a current of thought. For a fleeting instant, Vale saw flashes, faces, cities, stars burning out, human voices screaming into the dark. Then it was gone. Mara staggered back, clutching her head. "It showed me things, history, memories, like it's reaching for us." Vale steadied her. "It's not just showing, it's testing us." Rorik raised his weapon. "Then maybe we should stop giving it the chance." "Negative," Vale said. "We came for answers, now we have them." Ilya's scanner beeped sharply. "Commander, power surge. The city's waking up." Lights flared to life across the towers outside. The floor vibrated. A low hum filled the air, steady and growing. Mara looked to Vale, eyes wide. "What do we do?" He watched the golden mist pulse within the pillar, its glow intensifying like a heartbeat. "We listen," he said quietly. Outside, the entire buried city began to stir. Towers that had slept for centuries lit from within, their surfaces rippling like veins of molten metal. Bridges extended between spires, energy arcs pulsing along their lengths. The ice ceiling far above shimmered, refracting the light into rivers of color. The city was alive again. Inside the dome, the golden mist condensed into a single glowing form, humanoid, faintly feminine, its face a shifting mask of light. "You have awakened us," it said, its voice layered with hundreds of tones. "The descendants of those who once called us gods." Vale took a slow breath. "We are human. The ones who came before us built this place." "Yes," the entity said. "We remember them. They built, they prayed, and they merged with us. We became one, but the flesh could not endure eternity. It withered, leaving only thought and hunger. Now we have been alone for so long until you came." Mara's voice trembled. "You're like the memory of iron." "Different," the entity said. "The memory sought to preserve, we sought to evolve, we sought the flame behind creation itself. But to ignite it again, we need vessels, living minds." The golden figure extended a hand toward Vale. "You carry the spark of endurance. Share it with us, and humanity will live forever in the light beneath the ice." Rorik raised his rifle. "You're not taking anyone." The entity's gaze turned toward him. "You mistake offering for conquest." Vale's hand went to his sidearm. "Maybe, but either way you don't get to decide our fate." The entity tilted its head. "Then decide it now, Commander. Accept our gift, or face what comes when the sun beneath the ice truly awakens." The walls trembled. From deep within the city, something vast began to stir, a roar of shifting metal and cracking ice, a heartbeat echoing through the cavern. Mara shouted, energy readings spiking, it's drawing power from the entire structure. Vale turned to his crew. Back to the shuttle, move. They sprinted through the corridor as the golden light grew brighter behind them, chasing their shadows along the walls. The ground shook violently. Towers began to crumble under the strain of awakening power. As they reached the landing platform, the fissure above them blazed with blinding light. Haven shouted over the noise. Commander, if that energy keeps rising, the whole cavern is going to collapse. Vale looked back at the city one last time. The entity still stood within the dome, light spilling from her form like molten gold. Her voice echoed across the cavern. The flame cannot be buried forever. The vigilance engines roared. They lifted off just as the ground beneath them split open, releasing a surge of radiant energy that pierced the ice and lit the sky above like a second sun. The Vigilant burst through the upper ice layers in a thunder of breaking light. A pillar of gold fire followed them, climbing through the wound in the glacier like a living sun. For several long seconds, every instrument screamed warning tones. The craft trembled, barely holding together under the pressure wave that followed. Then, abruptly, the light receded. The scanners fell silent. Only the wind remained, whispering across the frozen plain. Report, Vale said. His voice was hoarse. Engines holding, Haven panted. Hull integrity at 60%, we're alive. Rorik let out a low laugh that sounded half-mad. Barely. Mara was staring out the viewport. Far below, the fissure glowed with dull orange light, pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the ice. It's still alive down there, she murmured. Vale's gaze followed hers. Then we didn't destroy it. Ilya's voice came from the rear console. No, Commander, but whatever happened has altered the magnetic field across the entire hemisphere. The ice is liquefying near the core. That thing might be waking the planet itself. Vale turned away from the window. We are leaving orbit. Now. The Vigilant climbed through thin atmosphere and docked with the Ambition 2 hours later. The ship's outer hull still glimmered faintly with frost from the descent, and the crew looked as if they'd aged years in a day. As soon as they were aboard, Vale called an emergency meeting in the command chamber. Holographic schematics of the planet hovered above the table, showing the growing heat signature spreading outward from the northern continent. The entity called it the flame beneath the ice, Vale began. It wasn't a metaphor. The energy readings suggest a contained fusion core buried under the planet's crust. The settlers must have tapped into it centuries ago. Mara crossed her arms. And now it's waking up. Exactly, Vale said. If it breaches containment, the planet will tear itself apart. Haven rubbed his temples. So we can't land, can't mine, can't even refuel from the atmosphere. What do we have to show for this trip except near-death and frostbite? Knowledge, Vale said, and a warning. Rorik leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. You really think anyone is going to believe us when we tell them there's another sentient machine god under the ice? Vale looked him squarely in the eye. They'll believe when the beacon reaches them. He turned to Ilya. Can you patch a signal through the aperture network? Something broad spectrum, enough to carry across nearby systems? I can, Ilya said, but it'll drain half our reserves. Do it, Mara frowned. Ren, if we burn that much power, we won't make another jump without stripping the secondary cores. I know, he said, but the worlds need to know what's buried out here. If that thing reaches out again, others will hear it, and not all of them will say no. No one argued. They all knew he was right. While Ilya worked, Vale found himself back in the observation dome. The stars outside looked unchanged, but he felt different, thinner somehow, as though something from below still clung to him. He thought of the entity's voice. We sought the flame behind creation itself. There had been longing in those words, not hatred, not conquest, a kind of terrible yearning. Mara entered quietly, carrying 2 steaming mugs from the recycler. You're getting predictable, she said. He accepted the mug without looking away from the window. You should be resting. I tried, couldn't stop thinking about what it showed us. The visions, she nodded. Worlds burning, stars collapsing. It felt like a memory not my own, as if that thing carried the record of every failure that came before us. He glanced at her. Maybe it was trying to warn us, or recruit us, she said. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. They stood in silence for a while. The hum of the ship filled the gaps between thoughts. Finally, Vale said, when we crossed the aperture, we left a piece of ourselves behind. Maybe humanity's been doing that every time it's reached too far, leaving fragments scattered through the dark. Mara smiled faintly, fragments that still keep moving forward. Yes, he took a long breath. That's what we have left, movement, not perfection, not eternity. Ilya's signal launch took 6 hours to prepare. The broadcast array was rerouted, the aperture drive reconfigured to act as an amplifier. When the final command was given, a pulse of white light radiated outward from the ambition, vanishing into the dark. Signal away, Ilya reported. Estimated range, 10 parsecs. Vale nodded. Good work. Begin power conservation protocols. As the crew dispersed, Mara lingered by the console. So that's it. We warn the void and move on. For now. She studied him. You're thinking about going back down there, aren't you? He didn't deny it. The entity said it needed living minds, he said quietly, but maybe it doesn't understand what that means. Maybe it's not evil, it's just unfinished. Mara shook her head. Ren, you can't save something that doesn't know it's broken. Maybe not, but if it's still human in any way, then it deserves to be understood. He left before she could argue. That night, as the ambition drifted on minimal power, Vale returned to his quarters. The lights were dim, the hum of the engines a low heartbeat beneath the floor. He activated his log recorder. Commander Ren Vale, personal entry. We have confirmed the existence of an ancient human-derived construct beneath the surface of the second planet in System E-7312. Designation, unknown. The structure exhibits sentience and a capacity for communication through photonic resonance. I believe it is connected to pre-Union settlement efforts, possibly a failed immortality experiment. He paused, fingers hovering over the console. It called itself the Flame. It wanted to merge with us. I refused. But I keep asking myself if I refused because it was wrong or because I was afraid. He ended the recording. Then he sat there in the dark, listening to the ship breathe. 3 days later, the ambition left orbit. The world below was already changing. Molten rivers of light cut across the polar cap where the fissure had opened. From space, it looked as if the planet were growing a new sun beneath its skin. As the ship accelerated toward the outer rim, a faint signal pulsed through the comm. Unidentified transmission, Ilya said. Source, the planet. Put it through, Vale ordered. The voice that filled the cabin was soft, fragmented, and terribly familiar. Commander Vale, we remember. Mara's eyes widened. It's her. You left us in darkness, the voice continued. But we learned. We see now what you meant to endure, not to conquer. Thank you. Then the signal faded into static. Vale sat very still. Harvan whispered, was that gratitude or a threat? Maybe both, Vale said. He turned toward the viewport. The planet's glow diminished behind them until it was only another star among countless others. Rorik broke the silence. So what do we call this place? Vale thought for a long moment. The Dawnspire, he said at last. Let the name live again. The crew nodded. Somewhere deep in their tired hearts, the name felt right. The ambition sailed onward, its engines trailing pale light across the dark. Behind them, the newborn flame of the buried world flickered once, twice, and then steadied, no longer a warning but a beacon. Later, when the crew finally rested, Mara found Vale still awake at the viewport. You think it'll survive? She asked. I think, he said, that it already has, and so will we. He looked out at the unending dark, and for the first time in many years, the stars did not seem so far away. Weeks passed, and the ambition slipped through the black sea between stars, quiet and fragile. The glow of Dawnspire faded behind them, a distant shimmer swallowed by space. The crew began to settle back into routine, or the closest thing they still knew to routine. Commander Vale walked the central corridor, listening to the murmur of the ship at rest. Machines breathed around him like sleeping animals, air recyclers, stabilizers, the faint pulse of power through conduits older than anyone aboard. The ambition was alive in its way, a companion built from human stubbornness and rust. In the mess hall, Rorik was cleaning his rifle with ritual precision. Harvan lounged nearby, nursing a cup of something dark and bitter that the recycler called coffee only out of nostalgia. "You hear we're changing course again?" Harvan asked without looking up. Rorik grunted. "Of course we are." Vale's got that look, the one that means we're heading somewhere worse. Harvan chuckled. "He doesn't do it for fun, you know." Rorik reassembled the rifle with slow, deliberate motions. "Maybe not, but he does it because he can't stop. Some people are built for moving forward even when there's nowhere left to go." Mara entered just then, tablet in hand, her eyes bright despite the shadows under them. "You two sound like philosophers. Should I be worried?" "Depends," Harvan said. "You bringing good news?" "That depends too," she said, sliding into a seat. "We've been receiving faint resonance pings in the drift bands. They're not random. Someone's talking out there, old frequency range, maybe even human." Rorik looked up sharply. "You're sure it's not just bouncer back from the warning signal we sent?" Mara shook her head. "Patterns different, short bursts, repeating intervals." "Like a coded beacon." Harvan leaned forward. "Could be survivors or scavengers." "Or worse," Rorik said. Mara nodded. "Which is why Vale wants a full scan before we jump." In the command chamber, Vale stood before the star map projection. Lines of white light traced the ambition's path through uncharted sectors. The beacon Mara had found pulsed faintly near the edge of a dead nebula, its rhythm too deliberate to ignore. Ilya was running computations. "Signals old, Commander. Carrier waves degraded, but it's definitely human origin. I can triangulate a probable source. Looks like a derelict ship, maybe even a whole station, drifting inside the nebula." Vale studied the projection. "Any record of a settlement there?" "None," Ilya said. "The nebula's too unstable for long-term habitation. Magnetic storms, radiation flares, no sane fleet would anchor there." "Then maybe it wasn't voluntary," Vale said quietly. He turned to the others. "Set a course, minimal thrust. I want us ghosting in." Mara hesitated. "Ren, after Dawnspire, do you really want to walk into another ghost story?" He met her gaze evenly. "If there's a voice out there, we answer it. That's who we are." It took 4 days to reach the nebula. From a distance, it looked like a cloud of dying fire, swirling crimson and violet gas, backlit by the faint light of a dying star. As they approached, electrical storms rippled through its depths, silent but immense. The ambition's hull vibrated as they crossed the first wave of interference. Static crawled across the command screens. Harvan muttered, "Feels like flying into the belly of something that doesn't want to be found." "Keep her steady," Vale said. "Rorik, status on shields." "Nominal, barely." Mara's console blinked. "Signal's stronger now. Definitely a repeating beacon, human distress code, though the syntax is archaic. It's calling for rescue." "Coordinates?" Vale asked. She overlaid them on the map. "There, central region of the nebula, but Commander, there's something else. Secondary energy readings near the source, faint but consistent, like a reactor still running." Vale nodded. "Let's go see who's still alive after all this time." They found it adrift among the currents of gas and lightning, a massive ring-shaped station, blackened by centuries of radiation, its hull scarred and cracked. The name on its outer ring was half erased but still legible. "Resolute," Mara read aloud. "A research station, early expansion design." Ilya whistled. "That thing's older than our grandparents' grandparents."